Okay guys, let's start off by opening up the inputs here, and let's make a new input, and we're just going to call this run. And I'm going to make the path here a binding for the left shift button. So when we press the left shift, we want our character to run. That is the goal. Let's make that a hold, so add an interaction to this of type hold, and save that. So next, let's actually put the input in on the input manager script. Let's open that up. And this is very straightforward. All you have to do here is, we're actually not going to need this function here for sprinting input because we're just going to use the button, and you'll see what I mean. So let's go up to the top here, and I'm just going to make a header quickly right below the header camera rotation, and I'm going to call it, let's just call it button inputs. And then I'm going to make a public float for run input. Then on enable, I'm going to simply say player controls dot player movement dot run dot performed plus equals I equals greater than run input equals true. And all that means is when you hold down, because it has a hold interaction, the run key, which is left shift, it will turn the run input bool to true. Let's copy and paste it again, but instead of saying perform, we will say canceled. And what this does is when you let go of the shift key, we're going to make it say run input equals false. So then if you disable holding the shift key, you will stop running. So let's go over to the animator manager, and on the handle animation values, let's put a comma here and add a bool is running to the function. So we need to check for this down here, and we're going to say if is running is equal to true, we're simply going to say snapped vertical is equal to 2. And you'll see why here momentarily. Make sure you put it at the bottom of the code, it's very important. So it's the last thing that snap vertical gets edited by. And then over here on handle movement input, as you'll see, we have an error here. We'll have to put a comma, and we're simply going to pass the run input. So if we're running, or the run input button is being held down, we're changing our animator value to 2, our vertical animator value. So let's go over here on the animator blend tree and add a new motion field, and we're going to make the horizontal value at 0. And then we're going to make the vertical value at 2. And for this now, we're going to put in a run forward animation. So if we hold in the left shift key, we're enabling our vertical to be at 2, which will play this animation in this slot here. And we're going to enable or drop in our run animation rather, and that will give our player the ability to run. Now also, we want to put in 2 more here, okay? So we want a run forward left and run forward right. So I'm going to type in run, and here we go. I have run forward left, and then run again and run forward right. Now, they're going to have 2 on the vertical value, both of them. And then the run left will have -1, and the run right will have 1. Okay, that looks good. Also, we want to come out here on the is running, and we're going to say and snap vertical value is greater than 0. We do this because we don't want to be able to run backwards. At least you can in the Resident Evil 2 remake. So if there's any vertical value that's less than 0, we're not going to give the ability to sprint. So we only want forward motion when sprinting. Okay, let's save that. Looks good. Now if you go in game, you can see I can hold shift and I'm running forward left, and running forward right. And we can run around and sprint, and there we go. Now we have running movement. I wouldn't really call it a sprint, more like a run, but that's like the Resident Evil games. It's more just like a full-on jog or run. So there we go. Now that process is done. Let's get on to the next part of the video. And now we're going to add the quick turn. So if you press, I believe it's the Q key, in the Resident Evil 2 remake, your player will turn around and do a 180-degree turn, depending on where your camera's facing. So let's add a new action here and call this quick turn under player movement, and let's assign it the Q key. Let's save that. Okay, now in the input manager again, this one is going to require a bit more work, to say the least. It kind of warrants a video on its own, but I thought I'd combine the two anyway. So we're going to say public bool quick turn input. This is under the button inputs. And down here under player controls, we'll say player controls.player movement dot quick turn dot performed plus equals I equals greater than, and quick turn input is equal to true. And then we'll save that. Now down here, we're going to have to actually make a function for this one. We'll call it private void handle quick turn input. Okay, so what are we going to do? Well, obviously we want to make it so the player animates and turns around and does a full 180. So let's say if quick turn input, we're going to say / play an animation that turns the player. That's good. Now over here on the animator manager, we want to make a function that allows us to play an animation. So let's say public void play animation. And I'm going to make sure this one is going to say play animation without root motion. And the reason why we're doing that is because we're going to turn the player with code, not with the animation itself, because I find that's a lot easier. But if you have root motion animations that you want to use for this, that's fine. So you see now here, there's this apply root motion thing under the animator, and it's checked. Well, that's all well and good, but we're going to actually handle it so we really control the root motion with the script. So to do that, we're going to call upon a function down here. We're going to say private void. It's on animator move. Now, what we're going to do in this function is we're going to actually basically enable root motion for our character. So we're going to say vector3 animator delta position is equal to animator dot delta position. And then we're going to say animator delta position dot y is equal to 0 because we don't want any movement going up and down. Right below that, we're going to say vector3. We'll say velocity is equal to animator delta position divided by time dot delta time. And then we're going to say, well, we need to reference actually our player's rigid body because this is how we assign the velocity to move our player. So we'll call upon our player locomotion manager up here. And then we'll call that on wake by saying player locomotion manager equals get component player locomotion manager. And I believe then we need to go to that script and actually call upon our rigid body and make it a public variable. So let's go do that too real quick. Let me just see. I don't think we have it. Player locomotion manager dot. Yeah, okay. So we don't have that. Let's just jump over to the player locomotion manager real quick. So up top here, or wherever you want to put it, I'm just going to say public rigid body. I'm going to call it player rigid body. And then on awake, I'm going to say player rigid body equals get component rigid body. Excellent. Okay, now let's hop back over to the animator manager here. And then we're going to say player locomotion manager dot player rigid body dot drag is equal to 0. And then we're going to say player locomotion manager dot player rigid body dot velocity equals velocity. And right below that, we're also going to say transform dot rotation times equals animator dot delta rotation. And all that does is it means whenever an animation is playing on the animator and it has root motion, we're going to mimic the movement of that animation on our player's rigid body. That's all that function will do essentially. So back up here on play animation without root motion, we're going to say animator dot apply root motion equals false. And we're going to say animator dot crossfade. And then we want to say what animation. We're going to say target animation. And we're going to put it over a time of 0.2f. And we're going to have to pass a string for target animation to let this function know which animation we're going to play. Now, because of our onAnimatorMove function, we actually have to make a check later in the video for disabling root motion with a bool too. But we'll get to that. We'll do this one step at a time. So this right here is just going to handle moving the player. And as you can see now, if I go back into the animator, it says handled by scripts, where the apply root motion checkbox used to be. So with this functionality active, we're always going to have root motion right now. So back over here on the quick turn input, let's just say animator manager dot play animation without root motion. And then we're going to pass our quick turn animation. Okay, so let's save that. And now I'm going to drag in this animation here that I've labeled quick turn. And I'm going to go to the layers on the animator. And now I'm just going to go up here and come back to the base layer. And right where the base layer is above it is this little plus icon. We're going to hit that. We're going to call this override layer. We're going to hit this little icon here and change the weight to 1. And then we're going to right click on the inside and we're going to make an empty state. So I'm just going to call this empty. Now think of this state as whenever our player does an action, we're going to use this because it will override our locomotion. So let's drag in our quick turn and make a transition back to the empty. So I'm just going to, as you can see here, we'll play the animation and go back to the empty. I'm going to actually mess around with the exit time and the transition details just a little bit. So I'm going to minimize really the exit time. There we go. And what's going to happen now is it's going to play the animation, then come back to the empty state where our locomotion will continue. But now if I go into the game, you're going to see there will be a problem. So I come in here now and I press the quick turn. Oh, we forgot to call it on handle inputs. So let's go over here and hit typing handle quick turn input on handle all inputs and save it. Now let's try it again. If I go into the game here now and I press Q, you can see quick turn input triggers, but I'm not playing animation, or am I? If I drag the animator window up here, you can see it's making a constant transition back and forth between quick turn and empty, and nothing is really happening. And you can see the player shaking. What's actually happening is we're trying to play an animation over and over again in every frame because it's reading if quick turn is true, play this animation. So we got to do a couple things so that won't happen. First off, let's go over here and let's add a bool to this function, and we're going to say is performing an action, or is performing action. And we're just going to say right below that, or actually we're going to go make a bool now, starting on the animator, and we're going to say is performing action. And we're also going to make a bool on the player manager called is performing action, and you'll see why very, very shortly. So let's go over here now into the player manager, and let's make a header up here. We'll call this, you can call this flags or player actions or whatever you want to call them. I'm going to call it player flags. And let's say public bool is performing action. And then on update, we're going to call upon the animator for this. We're going to say is performing action is going to be equal to, let's call upon the animator component. So we'll say animator. And then we'll say animator equals get component animator. And then down here, we're going to say is performing action is equal to animator.getBool is performing action. And the reason why we're doing that is because if we play an animation before it goes back to the empty state, we're going to be triggering on a bool. And then once it goes back to the empty state, we can actually use another functionality to disable it once the animation has concluded. So what I'm trying to say is if we get the is performing action bool from our animator, we can turn it on and off with animations instead of with code. So the timing will be a lot better. And now I'm just going to say true on the end of that statement. So we are performing an action when we play our rotate or quick turn animation. And I'm going to call upon the player manager up here. I'm going to say player manager equals get component player manager. There we go. Okay, looks good. And now I'm going to come down here and right where this is up here, I'm going to say if player manager.is performing action, return. Because we don't want to be able to do a quick turn or a reload or an action if we're already doing another action. And this will count as an action, so we're going to disable that. And let's go over here now on the play animation without root motion, and we're going to say animator.setBool. We're going to set is performing action to whatever is performing action is when you call this function. So if it is true when you call it, then we're going to change that on the animator to true. Now if I play this animation, you will see I actually turn, and that's it. But we have a problem. Now it's stuck on, and our quick turn input is still stuck on. So we play the animation now, and we can't play it again because we're stuck in this, but we have to find a way to reset to these things. Well, this is very straightforward too. So first off, we're going to go back into the animator window here, and on the empty state, we're actually going to add a script to the state itself. I'm going to call this reset animator bool. Okay, so every time you enter this empty state, we're going to reset a bool. So we're going to use onStateEnter, and as it says up top here, onStateEnter is called when a transition starts and the state machine starts to evaluate the state. So basically, when we come back to the empty state after playing animation, we can run some logic. And if we played an animation that we would call performing an action, once the animation is over, we can then say we're no longer performing an action. And this is why we use the bool on the animator, and we grab it on the player manager from the animator, because then it's animation dependent, and we can time it to reset exactly when the animation is over, which works out a lot easier for us. So I'm going to make a header. I'm going to call it is performing action bool. I'm going to say public string is performing action is equal to is performing action. And then I'm going to make a public bool is performing action status. Oh, can't type today. 1 second. Public bool is performing action status. And I'm going to enable that at false, because whenever we come back to the empty state, we want to say we're no longer performing an action. We finished. And then it's simply just going to say animator.setBool is performing action, comma, is performing action status. And then I'm going to save that. And if we just X out a couple of these things here. Now we go back to the input manager. What we're going to do is we're going to say quick turn input is equal to false, just inside this. So if quick turn input equals false, play the animation. And there we go. So we can play it, but we're not actually turning around right now, and nothing's actually happening. But we have the animation playing, and it goes back to the empty state, and we can go back to moving again. Everything is fine so far. Next, let's go to the camera. This is where we actually switch the camera to look behind us. So we have some variables here: look vertical, look horizontal, and these adjust the camera rotations on the pivot object and the main object. Right here, we're going to say if we are performing a quick turn, we want to turn the camera 180 degrees, or we snap the camera, all the way around. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's pretty straightforward. We have our input manager. That's good. We're going to need that. We're just going to make a simple if statement here, and we're going to say if input manager dot quick turn input. And since this is called every frame, we'll be checking every frame. We can actually take this now from here and delete it and bring it over here. And then, we have to say input manager dot quick turn input equals false, because this thing now is blocking us from going here. So once we start playing the animation, if we're performing action, we won't be able to hit this again anyway. So let's say input manager dot quick turn input equals false. And then right here, we're going to simply say look amount vertical is equal to look amount vertical plus 180. And then we're going to say camera rotation dot y equals camera rotation dot y plus 180. And then we're going to say transform dot rotation. Whoops, not transform dot root. Transform dot rotation is equal to target rotation. Now in the future, we can add a little bit of a smooth effect to this. So we can kind of maybe you can add some blurring or make the camera snap around a little bit smoother. But that'll be in a polish episode. Right now, let's get the functionality laid out. So I have these cubes placed here. As you can see, it's yellow, green, blue, and red. So if I face the blue one, or the yellow one rather, I should snap and face the blue. So hit Q, there we go. So I snap and turn to the blue. If I face this red and snap, I should go to the green, and yes, we do. So our camera is working perfectly. Now all that's left to do is to rotate our player towards the camera, depending on where the camera's looking when we're done the animation. So let's make a public bool is performing quick turn. This is on the player manager. And like our previous code, we're going to come here in the player locomotion manager, and we're going to say, we need to call upon our player manager here. So this is under the player locomotion manager. Let's say player manager is equal to get component player manager. And then down here, we're going to say if player manager dot is performing quick turn, player manager dot is performing quick turn. Then we're going to want to rotate our characters. So what we're going to want to do is essentially use the same logic as we do up here when we're moving. So we'll say, except for one variable here, we're going to change rotation speed. We're going to make a new variable. We're going to call it quick turn speed because you want to turn a bit faster than your normal rotation. So we'll call it quick turn speed. I'm going to initialize mine and say 8. So we'll say quick turn speed. You can play around these values if you'd like. It's all going to be a little bit different for some people, I'm sure. Times time dot delta time. And then we're going to say transform dot rotation is equal to player rotation. Okay, cool. So we need to actually find a way to turn this bool to on, though, because right now we're never actually performing a quick turn. So let's take that. Let's say is performing quick turn is equal to animator dot get bool is performing quick turn. And we don't have that made yet, so let's make that right now. So let's actually go into the animator. While we're here first, let's go with the input manager. And right here, where it says handle quick turn input, we're going to go up here and we're going to call upon the animator. Right below the animator manager. And I'm just going to say animator equals get component animator. And then under the functionality where we have handle quick turn input, we're simply going to say right after we play the animation, we're going to say animator.setBool is performing quick turn equals true. Or even before the logic, rather. And this will make it so the quick turn bool on the player manager also turns to true. And that will make it so your character rotates towards the camera. And again, you're saying, well, why are we making this bool on the animator? And the answer is so we can reset it using the animator script on the empty state later, because if we don't, I'll show you what happens. We'll go to the game here, we press play, and we turn, sure. But now if we move around the character, he's continually turning because the isPerforming quick turn bool never resets. So as you can see here, it's still on. But if we actually go to the empty state here, and much like we did with our isPerforming action status, we can copy and paste this right below. And then we'll simply say isPerforming quick turn. And then we'll say isPerforming quick turn. And then isPerforming quick turn. Whoops, not is quick turn. My bad. isPerforming quick turn. And then isPerforming quick turn status. And then right down here again, all we simply say is we copy and paste this, and we say isPerforming quick turn, comma, isPerforming quick turn status. So what's happening now is after we end the quick turn animation and come back into the empty state, we are disabling isPerforming quick turn, which in turn disables it on the player manager, which in turn stops us from rotating towards the camera all the time. So if I go into the game here now and I hit Q for quick turn, we'll snap back to the blue cube, we'll snap back to the yellow cube. If I face this cube here, we'll snap back to the red cube, snap back to the green cube, and there you go. You guys have a fully working quick turn system and the ability to run around the map. This is coming together very nicely. I'm really liking this series so far. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, but I'm going to do one more thing before we go. So my animation here is not root motion, meaning, as you can see when I play the animation, the character doesn't turn. Now, if you do have a root motion animation, let's add a bool here now. And we're going to call this disable root motion because on our animator manager, we have that function going all the time. And that function is basically making it so we copy the movements of our animation. And you're going to get some conflicting values because if you have that happening and your player's turning the opposite way in the animation, you're going to have a weird, rigid thing happening. So let's reference the player manager here in the animator manager. And again, this is only necessary right now if you have root motion animations for your turnaround. We're going to say player manager equals get component player manager. And it's very simple. All we're going to do here is say, right at the top on animator move, we're going to say if player manager dot, oh, I didn't make that bool. Over on the player manager, we're going to make the bool for disable root motion that we just made on the animator. So we're going to say public bool disable root motion. And then on the update method, we'll call it as well, just the same as the other two. We're going to say disable root motion is equal to animator.getBool disable root motion. So if we disable root motion, it tells the animator tells the player manager, and then we can go from here. So we're going to do that. There we go. And we're going to say if player manager.disable root motion, return. Don't run any of this logic. And then we won't mimic the movement in the animations. Otherwise, go for it. And now, we still have one more piece to do. So basically what we're going to say here now is animator.setBool disable root motion. We're going to say that the true, because this function is called play animation without root motion. And then we're going to make a return here on the empty state. And just like before, copy and paste this logic on our reset animator bool. And we're going to change the header to disable root motion. We'll change the string to disable root motion. I'm just going to paste this right at the top here because it's kind of, I feel like, a more important bool. Disable root motion. The other two are actions, as this is just an actual animator setting, so just to keep it neat, I'll put it above the rest. And then we're going to say disable root motion status is equal to false, and then just like before, we copy and paste this line of code, and we put it up top here, and we say animator.setBool disable root motion status. So if you do disable root motion for one animation, when it comes back to the empty state, you'll have your root motion again for your movement. It'll come back online, basically. And now we save that, and just to show you it still works, here we go. If I hit the Q button, we turn, and then I can still walk around again. So our root motion's back. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, don't forget to drop a like, leave a comment. It does help appease the YouTube algorithm gods. And if you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon below. Got a lot more cool things to come in this series. So I will see you guys in the next episode.